I built enough reputation with the quality of work I did and, the services I provided, and just being there in the community and just sponsoring like little teams, like, hey, $50, just anything I could afford at the time just to kind of get my name out there.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing too. And as you get bigger in business, you forget where you came from sometimes. And I think that's one of the big things that once guys get to that $5-10 million spot, they forgot the hustle. They're not in the Facebook groups anymore. They're not going out to events. They're not doing all the grassroots stuff. And I call it the hand-to-hand combat. When you're in the beginning, you don't got money to spend. That's how I was. I was in every BNI. I was every Facebook group. What I would do is I had my my people that worked for me, their wives. I would pay them, they're at home, right? I'd pay them $25 to go into their community groups and post about us. Every lead they got, they would get paid. And I was like, the cool thing is you'll get paid, plus I'm gonna have your husband run those calls so if he's in the area, he can get home earlier, right? So like a lot of those things that we forget about and all the grinding that we had to do, I think, and if you're watching this, you're probably thinking back, man, I used to do all this stuff, but I don't do it anymore. And we become really reliant on digital and advertising and all these things that we forget, like, how did we start this thing and how do we grow it? All right, welcome to this week's episode of the Scale with Speed podcast. I'm your host, Victor Rancour. Today I have someone on that's, not only a close friend of mine, but also a business partner and someone that, a lot of people on social media are seeing and really watching his growth over the last couple of years, not only on his business that he's taken from, $2 million business to, pacing for over $18 million this year, but also on his personal journey, and we're going to talk a little bit about, the mindset and things that he's been able to do and the things he's been able to overcome. But I'm excited about this podcast. If you guys are in the home service space or just a person in general and you want to learn how to level up life, this is going to be the podcast for you. So my guest today is Kevin Fiscor with Fiscor Plumbing and Air. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks for having me.
So, Kevin, obviously, a lot of people are starting to follow you on your social media for a multitude of reasons. You want to tell me a little bit about Fiscor Plumbing and Air, kind of how you started that, and we'll talk a little bit about your fitness journey and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, basically, I had a boss that, really believed in me, and he told me I was one of the smartest technicians he ever met, and he encouraged me to, go out and get my contractor's license. So, long story short, May 22nd, 2017, I received my contractor's license. For the first year, I worked 2 jobs, running calls for my company before work, going to work for the company, and then running calls after hours and weekends, and then it just started snowballing, and I had to take the leap, as many of us have.
Yeah, and that's one of those things I normally don't recommend, right? The one toe in effect, I call that. And I think, when I first started Absolute, I remember, I came up with the idea, and literally like a month later I started a business, and I was making a shit ton of money and had my job. And I remember, I started Absolute Airflow, and fucking day one I got a call, sold my first job. And I went to go to work that next day, and I'm like, nah, fuck this. I'm going all in. And obviously that's a scary thing to do, and I understand why people do it, but I think, once you went all in, I bet you felt like a little bit different, right? The business started clicking a little bit better. Because it's hard when you're trying to obviously provide for your family. You're working for someone else, and the next thing you got to take that shirt off, put a different shirt on, and then you're like, "Hi, I'm Fiscor Plumbing Air." And you're like, earlier you might have been Conway's Plumbing Air.
Yeah. It was difficult, the whole mindset thing, just one hat to another.
So 2017, you start the business. You probably had a bunch of cash saved up. You trust fund, something like that?
Nah, I had to take a title loan on my first Harley.
Oh shit!
Yeah, to get my contractor's license, and I was working on my personal Silverado.
Nice. And everybody thinks you see those big companies out in your market, right? And Kevin probably saw that we had a company in our market, in his market that was the big player, right? You see them, you're like, man, they probably started they probably just started with all this, and at the end of the day, every big company you've ever seen started somewhere. Started small, started from a guy in a truck with a dream. So obviously, when you first started out, you're owner operator, probably sole guy, running every call, installing every unit.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about that and the grind that you went through with that side?
Yeah, it was wild. So I would install 2 to 3 days a week, and then run services, sell systems, to get the installs on the board. And that first year all out on my own, it was hard, selling new cut-ins, doing new cut-ins just by myself, spending 4 or 5 days on a new cut-in, and just literally in the attic just crying because I can't afford to hire anybody, can't afford the insurance is putting on the payroll, the taxes that come with it. So it It was hard.
Yeah, and I think, people that don't know my story much, but like I started out the same way. I mean, obviously, one thing I knew day one is I needed to hire people, so I didn't start out by myself, but I was the one doing, when we first started Absolute Airflow, I was doing the same thing. I was running the call, selling the call, and then I was stuck there installing it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the hell the deal is. Like, I feel like when you first start out, the only jobs that come to you are like the shittiest possible jobs, like cut-ins. Like I remember, like when I first started, like every lead was a fucking cut-in estimate.
Yeah.
And it's like you see this big price, you're like I sold it for $20,000, I'm gonna make a bunch of money. And then 5 days later, everything's paid, everything's done. You're like, where's my cash?
Yep.
And I think that was one of the things. Like I had to learn, like how do we get like actual people that have a unit that want to change the damn things. So I don't envy that. I do remember those days. Obviously, I wasn't working in Arizona where it's 100 and probably 50, 60 in the attic, so that doesn't help. But so you started like that. Obviously, you probably went through, just like most people, a couple years of just learning and trying things. And how did you kind of get your name out there as a business in the beginning?
Really, it was just everything that I was reading online, all the owners groups, things like that. It was before you even had your thing, before what you started. And quite frankly, just a lot of guerrilla marketing. I was going to, craft fairs. I was going to farmers markets. I got involved in every single Facebook group, every single rental agency, everything and anything. And I even jumped into home warranty, and I ran home warranties for about 2 weeks. And then I just said, that this isn't for me. But, basically, I built enough reputation with the quality of work I did and, the services I provided, and just being there in the community and just sponsoring like little teams, like, hey, $50, just anything I could afford at the time, just to, kind of get my name out there.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing too. And as you get bigger in business, you forget where you came from sometimes. And I think that's one of the big things that once guys get to that $5-10 million spot, they forgot the hustle. They're not in the Facebook groups anymore. They're not going out to events. They're not doing all the grassroots stuff. And I call it the hand-to-hand combat. When you're in the beginning, you don't got money to spend. That's how I was. I was in every BNI. I was every Facebook group. I had what I would do is I had my my people that worked for me, their wives. I would pay them because they're at home, right? I'd pay them $25 to go into their community groups and post about us. Every lead they got, they would get paid. And I was like, the cool thing is you'll get paid. Plus, I'm going to have your husband run those calls, so he's in the area, he can get home earlier, right? So like a lot of those things that we forget about and all the grinding that we had to do, I think, and if you're watching this, you're probably thinking back, man, I used to do all this stuff, but I don't do it anymore. And we become really reliant on digital and advertising and all these things that we forget, like, how did we start this thing and how do we grow it?
If you're a home service business owner and it seems like everything you try doesn't seem to work, you need to join us March 26th and 27th for our Profit is Sanity Mastermind. We're going to tell you all the tips and tricks and everything that we're doing in today's market to dominate. Come in, we're going to teach you the key KPIs that we're using inside of our business to help scale all of our Rocket Group companies over 200% year over year. And we're going to share it with you. We're not going to hold anything back. You want to see our P&Ls, you want to work with my team, you want to work with my COO, my operations person, my call center rep. You're going to have access to everybody over those 2 days. So if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, make sure to click the link below. Get signed up March 26th and 27th. Profit is Sanity. It's going to be in Columbus, Ohio. Can't wait to see you there. Can't wait to help your business grow.
So you're doing a bunch of guerrilla marketing, and I think we met in 2020.
Yeah.
2020. I think I was back when I was running Service Hero Academy. We just did our very first. You came to the very first sales training. Yep. Kevin came to the the original sales training, first one I ever did, and I always remember one thing about Kevin. Right, most people go to events, they come in there, they bullshit around, they party all night, they come in hungover, and they sit in the back of the room. Kevin every time, and back then he was drinking and partying, but at least he wasn't doing too crazy. But he would always sit front row center. I've never seen anybody take more notes. Right, that was the one thing I always noticed. That by the end of it, his entire notebook was always full. Do you want to talk a little bit about like what made you think like that? Because most contractors, they go to an event, they just go there and party and bullshit.
Well, whether I was an employee or somebody else being sent to an event or a training or things like that, I took it seriously as my job. I didn't see it as a vacation to go out to the titty bars and go get hammered and stay out till 1-2 in the morning. Then the next day you're hungover, you can't pay attention, you can't focus, and I have ADHD on top of all that. So basically I would take my notes, go back to the hotel, drink like a recluse, I can't even say the
recluse,
word.
Yeah.
Recluse, drink like a recluse, and just go over the notes and just basically cram study. you know, just basically how I had to learn. You know, I would just write down everything the nuggets. I would just pull nuggets out, and I would just go over it and go over it and go over it, and then, you know, it's just like kind of studying game tape. You know what I mean? And you know, when my sales were off or I fall in a slump or something was going on, I was always revert to the notes from your classes.
Awesome. So that's in 2020. You know, fast forward a couple years. You know, obviously the business, it was just you. What point did you really start bringing on employees? Like, you know, obviously the first couple years it was you. Then I think you had one guy that was working for you when you came out to the training. Eventually you hired some install crews. You want to talk about like that transition of just doing everything yourself to like letting go of a little bit of the control and allowing employees to come in?
Yeah, you know, and obviously, you know, it was really hard at first. I was scheduling my lunch breaks to when I would have a crane lift, and I'd be worried about my employees dropping a unit on the roof, and I ended up realizing I have insurance for this. They don't want a unit to fall through a roof. They don't want anything to happen on a job, and I was really just micromanaging the shit out of everybody. And, you know, I learned that was pretty toxic, you know, and it's speaking with you quite a few times at trainings and things like that. And, you know, I just started adjusting my prices, and then just, you know, I didn't have any benefits, so I had to bring people on with a higher wage to get them to come, but I was still getting the bottom of the barrel, you know.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's one thing you definitely went through the bad news bears of employees and watching that stuff. So, you know, obviously started in 2017, you're working out 2020, you really started thinking differently. I think in 2020 when you came to me, you were probably running like 15 calls a day, flipping run caps all day, and trying to make a little bit of money like that, which is impossible to do. If that's the business model you're running, you got to change up what you're doing. So, you know, I know fast forward, you know, I think 2022 is kind of when you started your whole fitness journey. 2023.
Yeah. I was, as you remember, I was bright weight. I was, you know, obese. It's just, I'm kind of a dinosaur in this trade. I think I'm on year 25 right now, and quite frankly, you know, it was just getting through your calls, you know, and just that whole entire mindset of just getting through the call, find out what is broken, and just replace that one part. And you get in that habit of hitting drive-throughs, and then, you know, basically, you know, when I came up in the trades as a bunch of us, you know, if you weren't out partying with everybody, you were like a cop not on the take. You couldn't be trusted, you know, you were shunned out and just kind of blacklisted. So, I mean, my drinking got way out of control, you know, my habits, my food consumption. I mean, I was just being a gigantic consumer and not caring about my health. And Bree, God bless her heart, she was just like, hey, there's something wrong with you, we need to go to the doctor. And I was like, typical guy, fuck that, I ain't going to the doctor. And, you know, she twisted my arm, and we went to the doctor, and the doctor was basically, he said, I'm post-hypertension, I'm pre-diabetic, my blood pressure is ridiculous, I'm going to have a massive stroke, you know, within 6 months, and I'm going to be dead. And my stepdad, at 46, he left this earth, and, you know, and I saw the fallout from my stepdad, Frank, you know, having a stroke and dying, and it just tore the family apart. And, you know, I don't even remember how old I was, but, you know, I was in my early 20s, and, you know, I lost my best friend. I would call my dad on the way home and just talk to him. Like, he raised me, he was my dad. And I'd be like, hey, this is going on. He was a heavy diesel mechanic, so he loved hearing about the things. And just, you know, the hardest part was basically like, shit, I'm gonna call my dad, he'll know what to do in a situation, you know, like outside of work, personal shit. And then you're just like, I just said, you know, I have to change. And, you know, and then I was drinking 10 shooters of Tennessee Honey a night in a 12-pack. And my daughter at the time, she was just like, Daddy's got wobbly legs again. And I always knew in the back of my mind, kids are getting older, I'm going to have to stop drinking. But, like, I was scared. Like, it had its fucking hooks in me. You know, like 5 o'clock coming around, I know I got 5 more hours of calls, and I'm here shaking like, God, yeah, I need a drink. But that broke my heart. And I was drinking a blackout every single night, not knowing how to deal with the stress of the company and things like that. And quite frankly, you know, just like talking to you, you know, the fish rots from the head, and I was rotting the fucking company. I was the worst part of the company. It was me, the leader.
Yeah, and it's sometimes it's hard, right, to look in the mirror and realize. And I've been there. I mean, I've been my own worst enemy most of my life, right? Like I always say, like, if I got the hell out of my own way, I'd be a fucking billionaire already. Like, that's just a reality. And sometimes we have to take a look at ourselves and realize, okay, like, it's not everybody around me, because I mean, I've been there and blamed everybody, and every single person around me, every employee, manager, relationship, I blamed everybody but myself. And the same thing, it sounds like you finally got to that point. So that was, I think that was the end of 2022 when you left the Vegas event, right? Like right around there.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I still remember the last night I was drinking. Me and you were at an event in Scottsdale, and I ended up closing the bar down, and just the worst hangover. I was just smashing old fashions and Manhattans, and I had the worst hangover the next morning. And I just basically told myself, I'm done. This is it.
Well, first off, congratulations. It's hard to make that move. Obviously I've seen it, from the outside and working in and being, you've been a client with us for a long time, and from sales training to business coaching and stuff. And, I know we had first started talking about, maybe partnering, something like that in like 2022, end of 2022, 23. And I still thought to myself, keep in mind, Fiscor isn't a tiny market, right? It's northern Arizona. So everybody thinks it's Arizona. You're thinking Phoenix and all these people. Well, now drive 2.5 hours north of there, and that's where Fiscor is, in the middle of nowhere. Total area of we service 150,000 people, right? So to think like, hey, I'm going to come in there and build this big business and do these things, sound like almost an impossibility, right? And then obviously there's multiple problems that go with having a small market like that. Recruiting, how do you get good employees, right? Like, people aren't the best guys usually don't live in the places like that, right? We have that. We have the market share. How big can you really grow a business there? And then on top of that, there's just so many logistical things that we go through. From there's no equipment distribution within an hour and a half, 2 hours of us, so we had to drive and get all these things. So I remember when you first started talking about it, and I'm like, I don't know if I would want to do it. I'm like, what can we really build there? And I think that, finally, I think it was in April or May of 2024, I was like, you know what? I think you're at that point. Like, you're getting ready to do a deal with another private equity group. They wanted to come in and partner. They were going to give him a shitty valuation for what he could have got. And I think when me and Michelle talked to you and Bree, and we're like, you know what? We're going to do this. We're going to partner with you guys. And that was actually the first company that Rocket Group partnered with. And I can tell you right now, I was definitely, my mindset is like, how the fuck are we going to do this? Like, can we really help these guys? Can we really grow this thing? And I still remember the first time I went out there, I'm like, we are in the middle of fucking nowhere, dude. Like, this is nowhere. And, right away we realized, hey, there's an opportunity here. We just have to come in and kind of change a lot of things. And that came in with a lot of changes. And I think you want to talk a little bit about those first couple months, because I think Kevin was ready to freaking jump off a cliff with all the things we're trying to implement. Keep in mind, this is heading right into summertime, busiest time of year, and we're like, let's do all these things. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it definitely was a ride. I was super fresh to sobriety, not even a year underneath my belt, and you came in, fixed the inefficiencies with the business, the operations, things like that, and you brought in some players, and it really just started changing things. And we partnered in May, and then by June everything was clicking, and then July came, and July was just bonkers. I think and before that, quite frankly, I think my biggest month was like 157,000 or something like that, and that was like middle of summer. And then here we are like at 700,000, and just all hands on deck trying to just smash a record. And my wife was stressed out, I was stressed out, and that was like the first thing that clicked in my brain, I need to become mentally stronger for this, because literally I remember talking to you and Michelle, and I'm just like, this is too much for me. I can't take this. And you're just like, this is just the beginning, bro.
Yeah, well, it was funny. I remember one time he calls me, and I answer the phone, and he's fucking Kevin. When he's mad, he gets heated. His whole face turned red. It's an animated thing. It's like a cartoon character. But I'm not. I couldn't see him, but I already knew what he was looking like. He just started pacing around and shit. And he's like, how about you just take this fucking company? I'm fucking done with this. I don't want it anymore. And I'm like, dude.
Yeah, I was ready to just walk away.
I'm fucking over this. And and people realize, people don't realize what it takes to make money, right? If making money was easy, everybody would do it. In reality, there's so many things you have to put in place. And right now, obviously, keep in mind, this company went from a couple people, little mom and pop shop, to all of a sudden now we're doing, $600,000-$700,000 a month. all within 3 months time, right? So like it was a lot of changes, and that's a pressure cooker, right? Like obviously normally if I'm going to do a deal, I normally don't want to do it like right when summer's starting, because then like there's so many things to implement. So I told him, I was like, just get through the summer. We just got to get through the summer. And we ended up getting through there, and during that time, like, a lot of the issues that we were running into is we haven't been able to get the talent yet. No one knew who Fiscor was. We were a small company. We didn't have all the things that the other companies in the market had. And obviously, when we came in, it was like, we're changing all the things. The employees are like, what the hell, you want us to do X, Y, and Z? We want an install done in a day. We were taking 2 to 3 days, like, and really trying to, like, and I told Kevin, nothing happens overnight. You have to start top grading, right? Top grading, little by little, we'll implement it little by little. And eventually we're gonna be doing $1 million months, right? And to think of doing $1 million month in a town of 150,000 people is fucking crazy anyways to even think that we can do it. But as we started going, we realized we can do this. And I think we hit like 900,000 in January last year or something like that. And I was like, dude, I think we're gonna hit $1 million month. And sure enough, April of 2025, we hit our 1.3 or $1.2 million in April. I'm like, holy shit, I think we're about to own this market. So obviously the business is doing well. I think this year we're pacing right now. If we stay on the pace we're at, with an $18 million business in a tiny little town, right? And we're not doing anything special. We're just implementing the things that I've been teaching for years. We're implementing stuff, but it's like you just have to do the little things. And so this is Kevin, I think, version like 48.0 or something like that. So we joke about it all the time. So like Kevin, like he'll go through stages and he'll talk to us. And he's like, you know what? All right, I'm back. I'm good. And like, okay, now you're 2.0, 3.0. Like, and he's had to go through so many changes, obviously from being the leadership side, the mental side. You want to talk a little bit about what you're doing? Obviously you got into ultra marathons, which is, if no one ever heard of an ultra marathon, it's probably the most gruesome thing you can do to a body. It tests you mentally, physically. And like, if you hate yourself and you just really like do not like yourself, you should start running ultra marathons, because it's going to take you having to just completely destroy yourself to do it. So you want to talk a little bit about like how you got into the running stuff and the ultra marathons?
Yeah, basically, my daughter asked me this, like, I'd say about a year ago. She was like, Dad, why do you run so much? And then, I like, basically, I called David Goggins, and I know I'm going to get a bunch of shit for this, and I don't give a fuck. He's my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. That man pulled my head out of my ass. I related to everything he had to say in that book, and quite frankly, I had to kill the old me, and I had to break those shackles and everything. But I picked up running, because I was big. I was 270 pounds, and Maisie was just like, why? And I said, well, I wanted to learn and earn discipline. Like with running, if you quit, you're quitting on yourself. You're not quitting on anybody else. And I trained for my first marathon, and everybody's just like, oh, mile 20, mile 22, you're going to hit a wall and this and that. I never hit that wall. And, I've got very addictive personalities and things like that. So I go all in on something, and I was basically like, what's greater than this? And I wasn't fitting in, with nothing against road runners, but it just wasn't my group of people,
Yeah.
And
they're kind of pussies. You could just say, if you run on the street in your little fucking fancy shoes and you prance around like a little fairy, just stop it. You're embarrassing yourself. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's I love all endurance sports. I run on the road. I do some road races, things like that. But it wasn't giving me what I want, and quite frankly, everybody just was acting stuck up with their nose in the air. And like the road race, everybody thinks they're fucking pro and this and that, and everybody's the best. Well, when you're on an ultra marathon, you're lining up with the greatest people in the sport, in these big races, and you'll be standing next to the number 1 ranked female or male in the world, and they're just like looking at your babe, see your name, and like, oh, hey, you know what, Kevin, I hope you have a great day, this race is going to be great, da 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 da, but like it's more welcoming. But basically, I have ADHD, and I get bored of just running flat. I want a challenge, and I am only truly happy when I suffer, and that's no bullshit. So it makes me feel alive, so basically, banged my first 50K and then just kept building from there.
I feel like most business owners, must enjoy suffering, because most of them, it seems like that's what they like to do because they don't want to change.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny you say that. It's like, man, I think most of my listeners might actually be into suffering. I think that might be what they're into, because They keep running the same playbook, doing the same shit over and over, year after year, and they can't figure out why they're not making money. So obviously you can kind of tie that all in together as far as the ultra marathon stuff. But so you're running ultra marathons. What do you weigh now? You started at 270, and now you're
270. I got down to my lowest weight, and you're kind of, joking with me about it, but I got down to 166 pounds, and I was small. I was running 60 plus miles a week, and it's just. Yeah, I was running a lot, and I was still doing strength at the time. But right now I weighed in this morning at 187 pounds.
Nice.
So I'm putting on the muscle and things like that. But what I love about these ultra marathons, it's conditioning my brain for what I'm gonna face in business. Because during these races, there's so many high and low points. Like in a marathon, you go to hell and back once. In an ultra marathon, you're in and out, in and out, in and out, and you enter pain caves, and quite frankly you forget about like a lot of fucking childhood trauma and shit like that you've endured, and you close the door, but like it's fucking boom wide open, and you're fucking in a vulnerable state. Your fucking body's telling you that you're dying, your mind's saying we have to do this. So it's literally mind over matter, and I just saw a direct correlation with business and this right here, and it's putting myself in and out of the fire. I am forging myself, and every time I run an ultra marathon, I'm learning more and more about myself, and it's making me a stronger operator and a better leader, because literally during these races you'll have a pain that moves here or wherever it may move, and you have to figure out what's causing that pain, where it's coming from, or GI issues or nutrition issues, and you have to troubleshoot while you are running on fumes in your brain. Like anybody that runs, you get runner's brain, but imagine runner's brain about 40 miles deep.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching Kevin run the little marathon the other day, or half marathon. I'm good on the sidelines, but no, at the end of the day, I mean, I've seen you just change as a human. Not only business, personally, but like your family, the way you interact with your family. I think that's one of the big things. As you build your business, you have to bring your family in. You got to have them involved, and everywhere Kevin goes, his family's there. And I think the coolest thing I ever saw was, I think you had just finished one of your first or second ultra marathons, and I saw the look in your kids' eyes and the respect they had for you, which I don't think they probably had before, because they didn't look at you like that. But watching you cross the finish line, I remember just thinking like, man, his kids are so proud of him and the way that he's changed. And that's a lot of times, like we give so much to our business, we give so much to everything else, we forget about what's the most important thing to give to, and that's our kids and family. So now, Kevin, like what's the next step? I know we got Fiscor now. Like I said, we're gonna do 18 to 20 million. Ideally, probably 20 million, because how we like to do things a little bit bigger. $20 million business. You get to the point now, your day to day is a little bit different. I think before your day to day was run every little thing and everything, and now we got managers, we have people in place, we have systems in place, and you want to talk about what you do now. And now that you're the owner rather than the operator all day. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about a little bit what your day to day looks like?
Yeah, day to day, my day begins around 3:30 in the morning. I get the quietness. I'm in bed, early and things like that, but like I get the quietness, and it allows me to journal, reflect, Gratitude is like one of the biggest fucking things that I've learned, when you're going through a rough spot, is just to hit that fucking gratitude button. There's a guy I follow on Instagram, and like once I saw that, I like to reflect and just remember where I came from and where I was at. But it allows me to look at the board, go through some emails, get to the shop 30 minutes early before everybody else, check in with the different departments, whether we're doing sales, service training, sales training, or install training. I'll start the morning out with the training with the guys, with the team, with the Rocket Group team, and then basically just check in with every single department within the office. And I get back, go through some emails, and basically as problems arise or things that I need to take care of, it allows me to be able to pivot and just float and check in with everybody, and then have the free time for my training.
Nice. So definitely a little bit different than it was before. So hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Like I said, if you ever want to come out, we have open door policy at Fiscor. If you want to come out, check out the operation, meet Kevin, kind of see what we do. If you guys want to fly out and do that, just reach out to me directly. We can set something up, or we can get you guys out there for a shop tour. Kevin, it's always a pleasure. Like I said, I'm proud of you as a friend, as a business partner, and everything that you're doing. If you guys like this episode, make sure to share it with a friend. Like, comment, follow us on YouTube. Help spread this podcast. It means the world to me. As always, business is a sport. Let's go out and win.